The sharp crack of a body hitting the polished airport floor echoed through Terminal B, like a gunshot. Olivia Mason's hands flew up in a desperate defensive gesture, her dark hair fanning across the cold tiles as three uniformed officers pinned her against the ground. Her mouth opened in what might have been a scream, but the sound that emerged was guttural, unformed, a noise that drew even more suspicious stares from the crowd gathering around the unfolding scene. A woman in a crisp beige pantsuit stood back from the circle of onlookers, her phone still clutched in her manicured hand, jaw set in righteous indignation as she nodded approvingly at the officer's actions. "I told you," she called out, voice carrying over the escalating commotion. She was acting suspiciously, refusing to respond to security. Thank God someone did something before it was too late. Blood trickled from Olivia's split lip as she struggled beneath the weight of the officers. Her fingers moved frantically, forming shapes in the air that nobody around her understood. Confusion and terror mingled in her wide brown eyes as handcuffs bit into her wrists. The carry-on bag she'd been pulling behind her lay overturned nearby, clothes and toiletries scattered across the terminal floor like evidence at a crime scene. Just 3 hours earlier, Olivia had arrived at Denver International Airport with the simple hope of catching her flight to Boston for Thanksgiving. At 32, this would be her first holiday with her extended family since the accident that had taken her hearing 2 years ago. The trip represented more than just a family gathering. It was a testament to her hard-won independence, her gradual adjustment to a life of perpetual silence. She had planned everything, meticulously arriving early to navigate security, carrying printed copies of her boarding pass, even wearing a small pin that identified her as deaf. None of those precautions mattered now, as she was roughly pulled to her feet, the officers' mouths moving with words she couldn't hear. "What's happening?" A tall man with salt and pepper hair pushed through the crowd of spectators. "Why are you arresting her?" One officer turned, keeping a firm grip on Olivia's arm. "Sir, please stand back. This is a security matter." "I'm Dr. James Cooper," the man persisted, his ID badge from Boston General Hospital visible on his lanyard. "And this looks like excessive force. Does she need medical attention?" The beige-suited woman stepped forward, chin raised. That woman was repeatedly ignoring commands from security and acting suspiciously. "I called it in because no one else was doing anything. Better safe than sorry in an airport. Wouldn't you agree?" "Doctor..." Olivia's gaze darted between the faces surrounding her, desperate for someone to understand. Her fingers twitched with the instinct to sign, but the handcuffs restricted her movement. A small notepad had fallen from her pocket during the scuffle, her emergency communication tool now kicked aside by the hurrying feet of travelers, giving the scene a wide berth. 4 weeks ago, Olivia had confirmed her flight details with a sense of nervous excitement. After the car accident that had damaged her cochlear nerve and plunged her into a world of silence, she had gradually withdrawn from much of her former life. Friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the new communication barriers. Her job as a graphic designer became fraught with misunderstandings. Even family gatherings transformed from sources of joy to anxiety-inducing challenges of lip-reading and awkward written notes. Her sister Catherine had been persistent, though insisting that this Thanksgiving should mark Olivia's return to family traditions. "We miss you," Catherine had signed clumsily, her fingers still learning the language that had become Olivia's primary mode of communication. "Mom's making her apple pie. Everyone wants to see you." The memory of that conversation seemed impossibly distant now, as Olivia was marched through the terminal, the curious and judgmental stares of hundreds of travelers burning into her skin. Her carefully packed suitcase remained at security, the gifts for her nieces and nephews still wrapped inside. The small notebook with emergency phrases she'd prepared for the flight was trampled on the floor behind her. The woman in the beige suit, Patricia Whitaker, though social media would soon dub her Airport Karen, watched with arms crossed as Olivia was led away. She turned to a nearby passenger who had witnessed her call to security. "You can't be too careful these days." She was just standing there, ignoring everyone. When the TSA agent was calling for her to step forward for additional screening, she just kept looking at her phone. Suspicious, if you ask me. "Did you see her do anything threatening?" the passenger asked, uncertainty crossing his face. Patricia's nostrils flared slightly. "I don't need to wait for a threat to recognize dangerous behavior." She was clearly ignoring direct instructions from airport security. In this day and age, that's all I need to know. She straightened her jacket with a sharp tug. "I fly twice a month for business. I know what normal passenger behavior looks like." In a small, windowless room, somewhere in the bowels of the airport, Olivia sat handcuffed to a metal table. A security camera blinked in the corner, its red light the only indication that anyone was watching. Her cheek throbbed where it had hit the floor, and her wrists were already bruising beneath the tight metal cuffs. No one had offered her water, and no one had brought in an interpreter. The isolation was complete, terrifying. Two TSA officers and an airport police officer observed her through a one-way mirror. Dispatch said the 911 call reported suspicious behavior and possible terrorist activity. Officer Reynolds said, scrolling through the report on his tablet. "Doesn't look like much of a terrorist to me," said one of the TSA agents, a younger man named Garcia. "She hasn't said a word since we brought her in." "That's part of what makes her suspicious," the other agent countered. "Complete non-compliance with verbal commands, refused to acknowledge security protocols, became physically resistant when approached." Garcia frowned. "I don't know. Something feels off about this one. Did anyone check her ID, run her name?" Reynolds nodded. "Olivia Mason, 32, Denver resident. No priors, no flags in the system. Works as a graphic designer for some marketing firm downtown." "So what exactly did she do?" Garcia persisted. The complaint states she was ignoring direct commands at the security checkpoint, acting erratically, and making strange hand gestures that made other passengers uncomfortable. Reynolds read from the report. The caller was concerned about potential concealed communications or signals. Inside the interrogation room, Olivia's shoulders shook with silent tears. The pain in her body was nothing compared to the helplessness washing over her. She had no way to explain, no way to defend herself. The notepad she carried for emergencies was gone, her phone confiscated. She stared directly at the mirror, knowing someone must be watching, and slowly, deliberately mouthed the words, "I am deaf." Back in the terminal, Dr. Cooper had not moved on to his gate. Instead, he approached the customer service desk, his expression grave. "I just witnessed a woman being forcibly detained," he explained to the attendant. She appeared to be in distress and possibly unable to communicate. "Is there a protocol for passengers with disabilities in security situations?" The attendant looked uncomfortable. "Sir, if airport security detains someone, I'm sure they had their reasons. I can't comment on ongoing security matters." "She was wearing a pin," Dr. Cooper insisted, pulling out his phone to show a photo he'd managed to take of the scene. "Look right there on her jacket. That's a disability identifier, indicating she's deaf. Did anyone check for that? Did anyone call for an interpreter?" As this conversation unfolded, Patricia Whitaker was already seated at an airport bar, recounting her citizens' vigilance to a captive audience. "You should have seen how she was ignoring the officers," she explained, gesturing with her glass of Chardonnay. In this political climate, we can't afford to be politically correct when security is at stake. If you see something, say something. Isn't that what they tell us? A younger woman at the bar frowned. Did you actually see her do anything threatening? Patricia bristled. I saw someone deliberately ignoring security protocols. That's threatening enough. Or maybe she didn't hear them, the woman suggested quietly. Don't be ridiculous. The officer was shouting. Everyone heard him. Patricia took another sip of her wine, dismissing the suggestion with a wave of her hand. The younger woman pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. The hashtag #Airport Karen would start trending within the hour. The minutes stretched into an hour as Olivia sat alone in the interrogation room. Her thoughts turned to her family, waiting in Boston, her mother, who would be checking flight arrivals, her sister, who had promised to pick her up at the airport. No one would know what had happened to her. The realization sent fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. The door finally opened, and two officers entered. One placed a notepad and pen on the table in front of her, then spoke slowly, exaggerating his mouth movements in a way that made lip reading nearly impossible. Olivia grabbed the pen with her free hand and wrote in large, clear letters, I am deaf. I need an interpreter. American Sign Language. The officers exchanged glances. One left the room, while the other stood awkwardly by the door. 20 more minutes passed before the door opened again. This time, a woman with short gray hair entered alongside the officer. She immediately raised her hands and signed to Olivia. Hello, I'm Marcia. I'm an ASL interpreter. Are you okay? Olivia's body sagged with relief. Her free hand moved rapidly. Please help me. I don't know why I'm here. I was just going through security to visit my family. Marcia interpreted for the officers, her voice steady as she translated Olivia's desperate signs. She says she's Olivia Mason, and she's deaf. She was traveling to Boston for Thanksgiving with her family. She doesn't understand why she was arrested. Officer Reynolds looked uncomfortable. Ask her why she ignored direct commands from TSA personnel. After Marcia signed the question, Olivia's response was immediate and emotional. Marcia translated, she says she couldn't hear the commands. She was looking at her boarding pass and checking gate information on her phone. She has a pin that identifies her as deaf, and she carries a notepad for communication, but no one attempted to write anything down for her. Reynolds' discomfort visibly grew. A passenger reported that she was deliberately ignoring security instructions and making suspicious hand gestures. When this was interpreted, Olivia's eyes widened in disbelief. She signed rapidly, her movements sharp with indignation. She says she was probably signing to herself. Marcia translated, It's a habit when she's nervous. She was mentally rehearsing how to communicate with flight attendants about her needs during the flight. As the full situation became clear, the atmosphere in the room shifted. What had begun as a terrorism investigation was rapidly transforming into a potential civil rights violation. Officer Reynolds stepped out to consult with his superior, leaving Marcia and Olivia alone for a moment. This happens more often than people realize. Marcia signed sympathetically. The world isn't designed for deaf people. Olivia's response was bitter. 2 years since I lost my hearing, and I've never been treated like a criminal before today. While Olivia's situation was slowly being clarified in the interrogation room, the incident had already escaped the confines of the airport. A passenger had recorded the arrest on their phone, capturing the moment Olivia was slammed to the ground, her confused vocalizations, and the triumphant expression on Patricia Whitaker's face as she watched from the sidelines. The video, uploaded to social media with the caption, "Woman arrested at Denver airport for being deaf," Airport Karen Strikes had already accumulated thousands of views and shares. Dr. Cooper had not given up his advocacy. After being dismissed by the customer service representative, he had located the airport's administration office and was now speaking forcefully to a harried-looking manager. "This is a clear violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act," he insisted. "I want to know what's being done to ensure this woman has proper communication access and medical attention if needed." The manager, increasingly aware of the potential PR disaster unfolding, made several phone calls. Within minutes, the airport's head of security was involved, along with their legal counsel. Meanwhile, passengers waiting at gates throughout Terminal B had formed informal discussion groups, the incident spreading by word of mouth and through social media. The video of Olivia's arrest played on dozens of phones, and the story grew with each retelling. Many travelers began approaching airline staff, demanding information about the airport's policies for passengers with disabilities. "I've been flying through Denver for 15 years," an elderly man told a gate agent loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "And I've never seen anything like that. Shameful. Absolutely shameful." Patricia Whitaker remained oblivious to the shifting sentiment in the terminal. Having finished her wine, she gathered her belongings and headed toward her gate, still convinced of her righteous action. It wasn't until she overheard a nearby conversation explicitly mentioning the woman in the beige suit who called security that she realized she had become part of the unfolding story. Her pace quickened as she noticed several people glancing in her direction, phones in hand. The comfortable anonymity she had enjoyed was evaporating by the second. When she reached her gate, she found it buzzing with conversation about the incident, and not in the way she had anticipated. Words like disability discrimination and lawsuit floated through the air. Back in the interrogation room, a new figure had joined the group, the airport's legal counsel, a stern-looking woman in a charcoal suit. After a brief conversation with Marcia and a review of the situation, she addressed the officers. "Release her immediately, remove the handcuffs, return her belongings, and arrange for medical assessment of her injuries." Her tone left no room for argument. As the handcuffs were finally removed, Olivia rubbed her wrists, wincing at the raw skin beneath. "Through Marcia," she asked, "what happens now? My flight has certainly departed." The legal counsel responded with careful precision. "Ms. Mason, on behalf of Denver International Airport, I want to express our deepest apologies for this unfortunate situation. We will arrange for medical attention, accommodation if needed, and rebooking on the next available flight to Boston at no cost to you. If you're willing, we would also like to discuss how we can improve our protocols for passengers with disabilities." What the lawyer didn't say, though everyone in the room understood, was that the airport was desperately trying to mitigate what was rapidly becoming a public relations nightmare. As Olivia was escorted back into the public area of the terminal, a small crowd had gathered. Dr. Cooper was there, along with several other passengers who had witnessed her arrest. A woman stepped forward with Olivia's notepad, which she had rescued from the floor. Others offered water, tissues, expressions of support. The solidarity was overwhelming after the isolation of the interrogation room. Marcia continued to interpret as several people expressed their outrage on Olivia's behalf. One woman tearfully described having a deaf brother and how he avoided traveling alone for precisely this reason. An elderly man offered Olivia his seat while they waited for medical assistance. The airport medical staff arrived quickly, a young doctor gently examining the cut on Olivia's lip and the bruising on her face and wrists. Dr. Cooper stayed nearby, occasionally offering professional opinions on her care. The solidarity of strangers created a protective bubble around Olivia, a stark contrast to the hostility she had experienced hours earlier. As this scene unfolded, Patricia Whitaker attempted to board her flight, only to be approached by two airport officials who quietly asked her to step aside. The conversation that followed was brief but consequential. By now, the video of the incident had reached hundreds of thousands of views, with Patricia clearly visible, making the call that led to Olivia's arrest. "Ma'am, due to concerns about passenger welfare and airline policy regarding false reporting of security threats, your boarding has been suspended pending review," one official informed her. Patricia's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. I was performing my civic duty. That woman was ignoring security." "That woman is deaf, Ms. Whitaker," the official interrupted. "She couldn't hear the commands. You made assumptions that led to a passenger with a disability being physically injured. The airline has the right to deny boarding to anyone they consider a potential threat to passenger safety or comfort." "I'm the threat," Patricia's voice rose sharply. "I was trying to protect everyone." Several nearby passengers turned to stare, recognition dawning on their faces. Someone whispered, "Airport Karen," just loudly enough to be heard. The airline representative remained firm. "You'll be rebooked on a later flight while this situation is reviewed. The airline may also require a formal apology before allowing future travel." As Patricia was led away, still protesting her innocence, a different scene was unfolding near the customer service desk. The airport director had arrived personally to speak with Olivia, accompanied by Marcia, for interpretation and the legal counsel who hovered nearby, monitoring every word. "Ms. Mason, I cannot adequately express our regret for what you experienced today," the director began, his words carefully interpreted into sign language. "This incident has highlighted serious gaps in our staff training and emergency response protocols. I want you to know that we're taking immediate steps to address these issues." Olivia, still shaken but strengthened by the support around her, signed her response. "This can't happen to anyone else. I was lucky to have an interpreter finally brought in, but many deaf people might not have that advocacy. Your security staff need proper training." The director nodded gravely as Marcia translated, "You're absolutely right. Beginning tomorrow, we're implementing mandatory disability awareness training for all security personnel. We're also creating clear visual instruction cards at all checkpoints and ensuring that interpreters can be quickly accessed in any part of the terminal." As this conversation continued, passengers throughout the terminal had begun sharing the story on social media. The hashtags Jacques Justice for Olivia and Ya Airport Karen were trending nationally. News crews were already assembling outside the airport, alerted by the viral video and subsequent outrage. What happened next would later be described as a spontaneous demonstration of community accountability. As Olivia was being escorted to a quiet lounge to wait for her rebooked flight, passengers began to approach her, one by one. Some simply offered smiles or sympathetic nods. Others had written notes of support on napkins or boarding passes. A group of high school students on a class trip presented her with a card they had all signed. One flight attendant, who knew basic sign language from a previous job working with children with disabilities, signed slowly, "We are sorry. You are welcome here." The simple gesture brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. Tears not of humiliation or fear this time, but of recognition, of being seen. The story might have ended there, with apologies offered and lessons learned. But events took an unexpected turn when Catherine Mason, Olivia's sister, arrived at the Denver airport 3 hours later. Having seen the viral video and recognized her sister, she had immediately booked a flight from Boston. Catherine burst into the airport lounge where Olivia was waiting, rushing to embrace her sister. Their reunion, conducted in the fluid movements of sign language, captivated everyone nearby. After ensuring that Olivia was physically okay, Catherine turned to address the airport officials who remained nearby. "My sister lost her hearing 2 years ago in a car accident," she explained, her voice steady despite her obvious emotion. "She used to be a musician. Can you imagine that she played violin with the Denver Symphony Orchestra? Now she navigates a world that treats her disability as suspicious behavior." The revelation about Olivia's former career added a new dimension to the story, humanizing her in a way that resonated deeply with everyone who heard it. Catherine continued, "Today was supposed to be a celebration her first holiday travel since the accident. Instead, it became another reminder of how the world fails people with disabilities every single day." By evening, what had begun as an isolated incident had transformed into a catalyst for change. The airport director, sensing both the gravity of the situation and the opportunity it presented, called an emergency meeting of all department heads. New protocols were drafted for security interactions with deaf and hard-of-hearing travelers. Plans were made to install visual announcement systems throughout the terminal. Most significantly, a training program led by deaf community members would become mandatory for all customer-facing staff. Meanwhile, Patricia Whitaker found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. Rebooked on a late-night flight, she sat alone at her gate, painfully aware of the occasional glances and whispers directed her way. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Colleagues, friends, even her adult children had seen the video. The narrative was not favorable. A message from her employer particularly stung. "Patricia, we need to discuss this incident when you return. Our company values inclusivity, and your actions appear to contradict our public stance on disability rights." For perhaps the first time, Patricia began to consider the situation from Olivia's perspective. What must it have been like to be suddenly confronted, unable to hear the commands being shouted, confused and frightened as the situation escalated beyond her control? The justifications that had seemed so solid hours earlier began to crumble under the weight of this empathetic consideration. As the airport quieted for the night, with most of the day's flights completed, Olivia and Catherine sat together in a hotel room provided by the airport. Olivia's flight had been rebooked for the following morning, with first-class accommodations and a dedicated staff member assigned to assist her through security. "Are you sure you still want to go?" Catherine signed, concern evident in her expression. "No one would blame you if you wanted to just go home and rest." Olivia's response was firm. "I'm not hiding. I'm not changing my plans because of ignorance. If I don't go, she wins." Catherine smiled at her sister's resilience. "Mom's going to smother you with attention when she hears about this." "Don't tell her yet." Olivia signed quickly. "I want Thanksgiving to be normal. I'll explain everything afterward." The next morning brought unexpected developments. As Olivia prepared to check in for her rescheduled flight, she was approached by the airport's public relations director, who explained through Marcia that several news outlets had requested interviews. "You're under no obligation," the PR director clarified. "But this could be an opportunity to raise awareness about the challenges faced by the deaf community while traveling." After a thoughtful pause, Olivia agreed to a brief statement, standing before the cameras, with Marcia interpreting her signs. Olivia delivered a message that was both personal and universal. "What happened to me yesterday was frightening and unjust, but it's not unique. Every day, deaf people face barriers, misunderstandings, and discrimination. I hope this incident leads to real change, not just at this airport, but everywhere people make assumptions about others based on differences they don't understand." The statement, broadcast on morning news programs across the country, resonated deeply. By mid-morning, disability rights organizations had issued statements of support, and several airlines announced reviews of their training procedures for assisting passengers with hearing impairments. As for Patricia Whitaker, her journey home was subdued. The viral attention had forced a reckoning she hadn't anticipated. The carefully constructed persona of a vigilant citizen had been replaced by a more complex reality, someone whose unexamined biases had caused real harm. During her connecting flight, she drafted and redrafted an apology, struggling to find words that acknowledge the damage without making excuses. When Patricia finally arrived home, the controversy had preceded her. Her neighborhood social media groups were buzzing with the story, and former friends had begun distancing themselves. The company where she worked as a senior sales manager placed her on temporary leave, pending an investigation into whether her actions violated their code of conduct. Meanwhile, Olivia's journey continued with a remarkably different atmosphere than the previous day. As she boarded her flight to Boston, the crew greeted her with unusual attentiveness. The flight attendant, who had been briefed about her situation, knew to maintain eye contact when speaking, and had prepared written cards for important announcements. Fellow passengers recognized her from the news coverage, offering smiles and gestures of support. One elderly woman pressed a small angel pin into Olivia's hand with a note that read, "To protect you on your travels." The simple kindness brought tears to her eyes. When the plane landed in Boston, Olivia was surprised to find not just Catherine waiting at the gate, but her entire family. Her mother, father, 2 brothers, and several cousins stood together, many of them awkwardly forming the sign for welcome home that they had clearly just learned. Behind them stood representatives from the local deaf community, who had organized a small reception in solidarity. The Thanksgiving holiday that followed was unlike any Olivia had experienced since losing her hearing. Her family had prepared by learning basic signs, arranging seating to facilitate lip reading, and even planning games that didn't rely on auditory cues. The effort represented a level of accommodation that Olivia had previously thought impossible. Why did it take something this dramatic for us to really understand? Her mother signed clumsily as they prepared the traditional meal together. "We should have done better from the beginning." Olivia's response was gracious. "Sometimes it takes a crisis to create clarity. What matters is what happens next." And indeed, what happened next exceeded anything Olivia could have anticipated. The video of her arrest, combined with her measured public statement, catalyzed a national conversation about accessibility and disability rights. Major airlines announced new training programs for flight crews. Several airports across the country initiated reviews of their security protocols for passengers with disabilities. A week after Thanksgiving, Olivia received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "An apology, Patricia Whitaker." The message inside was lengthy, clearly the product of considerable reflection. "Ms. Mason, no words can adequately express my regret for the pain and humiliation I caused you. My actions came from a place of ignorance and unexamined prejudice that I am only now beginning to understand. While I cannot undo what happened, I am committed to learning from this experience and becoming an advocate rather than an obstacle for people with disabilities. I have enrolled in an American Sign Language course and am working with disability rights organizations to educate myself. If you are willing, I would value the opportunity to apologize to you in person and listen to your perspective. Regardless of your response, please know that I am truly sorry. Patricia Whitaker." Olivia read the email several times before showing it to Catherine, who had extended her stay in Boston to support her sister. "What do you think?" she signed. "Should I respond?" Catherine's expression was skeptical. You don't owe her forgiveness or your time. This could just be her trying to salvage her reputation. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. Maybe, but people can change when forced to confront their biases. Her apology seemed sincere. After careful consideration, Olivia composed a reply, accepting the apology while setting clear boundaries. Thank you for your email. I appreciate your willingness to acknowledge the harm caused and your commitment to education. I'm not ready for an in-person meeting, but I would encourage you to continue your learning journey. Perhaps in the future, when wounds have healed further, a conversation might be possible. The exchange, while brief, represented something profound, the possibility of growth from conflict, of education emerging from ignorance. It wasn't a fairy tale resolution. Real harm had been done, and consequences remained, but it was a step toward understanding. 3 months later, Denver International Airport unveiled a comprehensive new accessibility program, developed in consultation with disability advocates and with input from Olivia herself. Visual alert systems were installed throughout the terminal. Security checkpoints featured clear visual instructions in multiple languages. Most significantly, a dedicated team of staff trained in various communication methods was available to assist travelers with disabilities. At the program's launch event, Olivia stood beside the airport director, no longer a victim, but a catalyst for change. Through an interpreter, she addressed the gathered crowd. What happened to me was traumatic, but the response has been transformative. True inclusivity doesn't mean treating everyone the same. It means recognizing different needs and ensuring equal access and dignity for all. This program represents progress, not just for the deaf community, but for anyone who has ever felt marginalized or misunderstood while simply trying to move through the world. The applause that followed her statement was both audible and visible. Many attendees had learned to applaud in the manner of deaf audiences, waving their hands in the air instead of clapping. The gesture, small but significant, symbolized a community willing to adapt its behaviors to be more inclusive. As for Patricia Whitaker, the incident marked a turning point in her life as well. The professional consequences had been severe. She eventually lost her job and found herself briefly notorious in her community. Yet, in this crucible of public shame, something unexpected emerged: a genuine commitment to growth. She completed her ASL course and began volunteer work with a local organization that supported deaf children. The journey from ignorance to advocacy was neither quick nor easy, but it was real. 1 year after the incident, as Olivia prepared for another Thanksgiving journey to Boston, the process was remarkably different. The airline contacted her in advance to confirm her communication preferences. The security checkpoint featured a dedicated lane with visual instructions. The staff she encountered were trained to recognize her needs without making her feel othered. As she settled into her seat on the plane, Olivia reflected on the year that had passed, how a moment of trauma had sparked a movement for change, how her individual experience had highlighted systemic issues affecting millions. The world wasn't perfect. Barriers still existed, and not every interaction would be as smooth as today's had been. But progress was happening. Awareness was growing. And in her own small way, Olivia had helped push that progress forward. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile, making eye contact as she asked if Olivia needed anything before takeoff. The question was both spoken and signed, a small gesture that represented a significant shift in awareness. Olivia smiled and signed back, "No, thank you. Everything is exactly as it should be." As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the clouded November sky, Olivia gazed out the window at the diminishing landscape below. The journey ahead was clear, the path smoother than before. It wasn't just about one airport or one airline. It was about a world slowly learning to hear those who couldn't speak and see those who had previously been invisible. Progress would continue. One conversation, one policy change, one mind at a time. And Olivia, once a reluctant participant in that progress, had found her voice in the silence.